The rise of Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was never an overnight success. No matter how skilled he was, even at an early age, he had to work hard to be recognized for his talents. Even when he left Florence to move to Milan, only a handful of people knew about him and his skills in the arts. This move was his much-needed fresh start after feeling dissatisfied with his life in Florence after his apprenticeship and the issues that hounded him. His primary reason for moving from Florence to Milan in 1482 was to work for the Duke of Milan, Duke Ludovico Sforza, but not as an artist, but as a military and naval engineer, although he did mention in passing in his letter to the Duke his skills in painting and in sculpture. That's why when he was hired, his scope of work extended to include sculpting, painting, and engineering. He was later known as the Pictor et Ingenierius Ducalis, or painter and engineer of the Duke. While employed by the Duke, he also accepted commissions on the side, such as an altarpiece requested by the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception. He created the first version of the Rocks, 1483 to 1486, for them, but he felt that he was not being given a fair price for it, so he sold it to another person out of frustration. Leonardo soon began to be recognized by the other locals for his skills in the arts and engineering, that many began to consult him on these matters. It was also during this time when he created one of his most famous works today, The Last Supper, 1495 to 1498, although it was not as recognized during the time. But his main project during that period, and the main reason why he was hired by the Duke, was a bronze monumental equestrian statue of Francesco Sforza, who was the founder of the Sforza dynasty. He spent 12 years working on it, and the clay model was finally unveiled to the public in 1493, during the celebration of the marriage of Emperor Maximilian to Bianca Marie Sforza. Preparations to cast the model in bronze began shortly, and it was expected to be 16 feet high. Unfortunately, Milan was at the brink of war, and the metal was used instead for weaponry so that it was never cast. When the war hit, the clay model was destroyed when it was used as target practice of the French troops, and the Duke of Sforza eventually fell from grace in 1499. Leonardo then decided to go back to Florence after 17 years, first stopping at Milan and working as a military architect focusing on naval defense. He was well received by the people in Florence when he arrived in 1503, primarily because of the small fame and reputation he had gained during his stay in Milan. Leonardo was appointed in the same year as an architectural expert of a committee tasked with investigating the structural integrity of the church of San Francesco al Monte. He stayed as a guest of the Servite monks in the Santissima Annunziata cloister and was provided with a workshop there. Giorgio Vasari mentioned that it was in this workshop that Da Vinci drew the cartoons of St. John the Baptist and the Virgin and the Child with St. Anne, that allegedly drew large crowds who wanted to see it because of its beauty. Probably wanting more out of life, he again left Florence in 1502 and was eventually employed by Cesare Borgia, Duke of Valentinios, as his senior military architect and engineer. His time with Borgia is one of his most productive, not only did he sketch various topographical maps and city plans which influence modern cartography today, he also created landscape sketches, particularly in his attempt to divert the Arno River, and also numerous paintings that were both completed and left unfinished. It was also during this time, particularly from 1503 to 1519, that he created his most iconic painting ever, which was named the Mona Lisa. It was also in Florence when he began focusing on the sciences, particularly in anatomy, flight, and hydrology, and his observations and theories were collected in his numerous writings and notebooks. Da Vinci went back to Milan in 1506 upon the request of Charles d'Ambrose, who was the French governor there at the time, and focused on being an architect, and he had less time to create more paintings. His stay was cut short because his father had died 2 years earlier, and in 1507 he needed to go back to his father's estate in Florence to sort various issues with his brothers regarding the estate of their father and other family affairs. By that time, Leonardo da Vinci had already amassed a following of his own, from both Florence and Milan mostly, and he even had pupils, including Sale, Bernardino dei Conti, Cierce de Sisto, Bernardino Luini, Giampietrino, Francesco Melzi, Marco de Ogioni, Giovanni Antonio Beltrafio, and many others.